For centuries, the story of Lot's wife has remained a symbol of disobedience, but now, archaeologists have uncovered something extraordinary. Could this discovery change everything we thought we knew about this biblical legend? What if the pillar of salt wasn't just a fable, but a real physical monument to the past? The truth is about to be revealed. The story of Lot's wife has been passed down through generations, often used as a cautionary tale. In Genesis 19, God, in His mercy, warned Lot and his family to flee the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah before His wrath fell upon them. But with one simple command, God's mercy and judgment were made clear. Do not look back. Genesis 19:17. Lot's wife, however, in an act of disobedience, looked back at the city she had called home, and in that very instant, she was transformed into a pillar of salt. The story has often been dismissed by skeptics as a myth. After all, how could anyone truly turn into salt? Yet, what if this biblical narrative wasn't just a story, but a warning deeply rooted in both history and the very land where it took place? What if the tale of Lot's wife, like so many other biblical events, was not just preserved in scriptures, but also in the physical world? The Dead Sea, known for its extreme salinity, low elevation, and barren landscape, is a place where the very earth bears the mark of ancient history. Here, a mystery lies waiting to be unraveled. Could the land itself be a reminder of the biblical destruction and the tragic end of Lot's wife? Archaeologists are now stunned by the evidence they've uncovered, evidence that could shake the very foundation of how we understand this story. For centuries, the location of Sodom and Gomorrah has been debated, but recent discoveries near the Dead Sea have brought new attention to the region. One of the most intriguing pieces of this puzzle is the salt formations in the area, some of which bear a striking resemblance to human figures. And this is where things take an unexpected turn. Could these natural salt formations, long observed by local Bedouins and even mentioned by ancient historians like Josephus, be connected to the biblical account of Lot's wife? Stay with us as we delve deeper into these extraordinary discoveries and uncover what archaeologists have found, something that might just change everything we thought we knew about this ancient story. The story of Lot's wife doesn't just live in the pages of the Bible, it's etched into the very landscape surrounding the Dead Sea. As archaeologists continue to explore the region, one particular site stands out: Mount Sodom. This towering salt formation stretches over 5 miles along the southern shore of the Dead Sea and has long been a place of fascination for explorers and believers alike. Mount Sodom is unique not only for its sheer size, but for the fact that much of the mountain is made entirely of rock salt.
And nestled within this immense salt deposit is a formation that has captivated many: a towering pillar of salt. For centuries, locals and pilgrims have pointed to this structure and claimed that it bears a striking resemblance to a human figure. This formation, shaped like a woman frozen in time, has earned the name Lot's wife from the people living in the region. The association with the biblical story is so strong that it has persisted through generations. Even ancient historians, such as Flavius Josephus, a first-century Jewish scholar, mentioned seeing this pillar during his travels. He recorded that the pillar was still standing in his day, reinforcing the idea that this salt formation was not just a natural phenomenon, but something tied to the legendary story. And this testimony, given by someone who lived close to the time the story was first recorded, only adds to the weight of the claim. But skeptics are quick to dismiss such connections, suggesting that the pillar could simply be a natural occurrence, a salt formation shaped over millennia by wind and water. However, when you look closer, the evidence starts to tell a different story. Could this be the very pillar where the Bible's warning was not just spiritual, but literal? Could the pillar of salt that Lot's wife became actually exist in the world today? As we continue to explore, we must ask, is this salt formation simply an eerie coincidence? Or is there something more to this extraordinary discovery? What could it reveal about the truth of the Bible and the role of Mount Sodom in this ancient narrative? Hold on, because the story is only getting started. While the discovery of the salt pillar at Mount Sodom is fascinating, it is not the only piece of evidence that suggests a significant event occurred in the region. The geological and archaeological findings surrounding the Dead Sea provide even more compelling clues that connect directly to the biblical account of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Researchers have uncovered evidence of sudden and intense destruction at several sites near the Dead Sea, such as Bab Edra and Tal el-Hum. These sites show signs of extreme heat, with layers of ash, melted pottery, and burnt debris scattered across the landscape. Pottery found in these areas has been so thoroughly heated that it has been transformed into a substance resembling glass, a clear indication of the type of intense heat described in the Bible. The biblical account in Genesis 19:24 says, "Then the Lord rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens." For years, skeptics have dismissed this as poetic language, but the discovery of melted pottery and the layers of ash in these sites suggests that something catastrophic did indeed occur. The evidence points to a powerful, sudden event that could have caused such devastation, a destruction that would have left these cities buried in flames, as described in the scriptures. One theory that is gaining traction among scientists is the idea of a cosmic airburst or meteor explosion. Some researchers suggest that a meteor or comet exploded in the atmosphere, sending a shower of fire and sulfur to the ground. This would explain the intense heat and the widespread destruction found in the archaeological layers. The timing of this event perfectly aligns with the biblical account, where fire and brimstone rained down from the heavens, leaving the cities in ruins. This theory is not just speculation. Similar meteor impacts have been observed in modern times, and scientists can trace the effects of such an explosion on the ground. The similarities between these phenomena and the evidence found in the Dead Sea region are striking. It's as if the Earth itself is confirming the biblical narrative, with every layer of ash and every piece of melted pottery providing further proof that something extraordinary happened in this region. Could it be that Lot's wife was caught in the middle of this fiery judgment? The salt pillar at Mount Sodom may not just be a symbol of her disobedience, but a physical reminder of the moment God's judgment fell upon the wicked cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Could this unique formation be her lasting legacy, forever marking the moment when looking back led to destruction? The evidence is building, and we're just scratching the surface. The truth is out there, and it may be more astonishing than we ever imagined. As we continue to explore the mystery of Lot's wife, it's essential to explore the science behind the salt formations found in the Dead Sea region. The natural environment around the Dead Sea is unique, with its high salinity, extreme heat, and geological activity. This combination creates a setting where salt deposits are abundant, and the formation of unusual structures is entirely possible. Salt deposits around the Dead Sea are so prevalent that they have shaped the landscape over millennia. When the biblical fire and brimstone rained down upon Sodom and Gomorrah, it could have caused rapid chemical reactions between the sulfur and the abundant salt in the area. This intense heat may have caused the salt to crystallize and form solid structures almost instantly, preserving objects caught in the blast, much like what happens when fossils are formed over thousands of years, but in an accelerated, dramatic process.
Some scientists speculate that when Lot's wife looked back and was enveloped in the destruction, she may have been instantly coated with a layer of mineral deposits. The extreme heat from the biblical firestorm could have caused the salts and sulfur in the air to react with her body, turning her into a solidified statue, forever encased in salt. This could explain how the pillar of salt described in Genesis 19:26 came to be, despite skeptics' claims that such an event is impossible. Geologists have pointed out that the Dead Sea area is rich in gypsum and halite, the mineral forms of salt.
These minerals can quickly crystallize under the right conditions. The idea that Lot's wife could have been frozen in time by such a reaction, preserved as a salt figure, is not only scientifically plausible, but may even help explain the mysterious salt pillar at Mount Sodom. Though this theory is still debated, it aligns with the physical and chemical properties of the region. While some still argue that the pillar of salt is a natural formation that gains symbolic meaning over time, others argue that this discovery is more than coincidental. It's a direct connection to the biblical narrative, a literal and physical representation of the consequences of disobedience, frozen in time for all to see. Could the science of the region actually provide the missing link to the biblical account? As we continue to explore, the evidence is undeniable. The Dead Sea may be more than just a backdrop for ancient stories. It may be the very location where they came to life. What if the pillar of salt is not just a metaphor, but a real, tangible reminder of a moment in history that still echoes through the ages? While the discovery of the salt pillar at Mount Sodom and the geological evidence surrounding the region offer a compelling case for the historical accuracy of the Lot's wife narrative, there is a deeper, more symbolic layer to this story that we cannot overlook. The transformation of Lot's wife into a pillar of salt is not just a geological oddity, it is a powerful spiritual lesson that has resonated through millennia. Throughout the Bible, salt is often used as a symbol of preservation, purity, and covenant. In the Old Testament, salt was an important part of offerings and covenants, representing the enduring nature of God's promises. In this light, the pillar of salt can be seen as a stark reminder of the consequences of clinging to the past, particularly the sinful ways that God had called Lot and his family to leave behind. Lot's wife's glance backward is more than just an act of curiosity or longing for the life she left behind. It symbolizes an attachment to a world filled with sin, pride, and rebellion against God. When she looked back, she demonstrated a lack of trust in God's deliverance, a hesitation to fully embrace the future that God had promised. This moment of doubt, however brief, led to her tragic fate, forever cementing her legacy as a warning to future generations. The salt pillar standing tall against the backdrop of the Dead Sea serves as an eternal monument to this moment of disobedience. It reminds us that when God calls us to move forward, we cannot afford to look back. Lot's wife became a living symbol of judgment, a cautionary tale for all who choose to hold on to the past rather than fully trust in God's direction. In Luke 17:32, Jesus himself referenced Lot's wife, urging his followers to remember her. Remember Lot's wife. This simple yet profound statement is a direct call to believers to not look back at the things that once held us captive, the sinful desires, the distractions, the comforts of a world that is fading. It's a reminder to keep our eyes fixed on the promises of God and the future He has prepared for us, without being tethered to the past. As we consider the implications of the salt pillar, we must also reflect on its significance for our own lives. Are we, like Lot's wife, unwilling to let go of the past? Are we holding on to things God has called us to leave behind? The salt pillar stands as a visible testament to the cost of disobedience, but it also calls us to examine our own hearts and decisions. Are we moving forward in faith, or are we stuck, looking back? The story of Lot's wife is not just about an ancient woman who became a pillar of salt. It is about every one of us who faces the choice to follow God's call, trust His promises, and look forward with faith. As we continue to examine the evidence surrounding the story of Lot's wife, one crucial aspect stands out: the extraordinary consistency between the biblical account and the archaeological discoveries in the Dead Sea region. For centuries, the story of Lot's wife was dismissed by skeptics as mere myth or allegory. Yet, as modern science and archaeology have advanced, the evidence continues to point toward the possibility that the events described in Genesis 19 were not just stories, but historical realities. Archaeologists working near the Dead Sea have uncovered a wealth of material that seems to confirm the biblical narrative. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence is the discovery of ancient cities buried beneath the salt flats and ash deposits in the region. These findings suggest that a catastrophic event, likely the fiery destruction described in the Bible, took place right here, where Sodom and Gomorrah once stood.
The destruction appears to have been so intense that the remains of the cities were buried under layers of ash, with buildings and pottery scorched by fire so hot that they fused into glass-like material. This evidence mirrors the biblical description of brimstone and fire falling from the heavens. In the Gospel of Luke, Jesus himself referred to the fate of Sodom, emphasizing its sudden and overwhelming destruction as a warning to those who reject God's call. But the evidence doesn't stop there. The salt formations found along the Dead Sea shoreline, particularly those around Mount Sodom, have long been associated with Lot's wife. Local tradition and ancient records, including those of Jewish historian Flavius Josephus, testify that a pillar of salt stood in the area for centuries, marking the very place where Lot's wife was said to have turned into salt. Josephus, who lived near the time of the destruction, wrote about seeing the pillar of salt and confirming its existence. More recent geological studies have only added to the mystery. Geologists have studied the natural salt formations around the Dead Sea and noted their unusual and almost human-like shapes. Some of these formations closely resemble the figure of a person, often identified as Lot's wife, standing alone, frozen in time. While skeptics may argue that these shapes are purely natural, the sheer consistency of these salt pillars with the biblical story raises an intriguing question. Could this truly be the pillar of salt that was once Lot's wife? The combination of ancient texts, modern archaeological findings, and geological studies paints a picture that aligns remarkably well with the biblical account. The region surrounding the Dead Sea, with their salt deposits, destroyed cities, and intense heat, all provide an environment in which the biblical story could have taken place. But what does this mean for us today? It's not just about proving the Bible's historical accuracy. It's about understanding the deep spiritual lessons embedded within the story. As we piece together the archaeological evidence, we are reminded of the very real consequences of disobedience and the warning God gave to Lot's wife, which still echoes in our hearts today. As we continue our journey into the heart of this discovery, we must ask, how does this newfound evidence challenge our understanding of the Bible, and what does it mean for our faith moving forward? While the physical evidence surrounding the salt pillar at Mount Sodom is undeniable, the story of Lot's wife carries with it far more than just historical or geological significance. It serves as a profound spiritual warning that has transcended generations, offering timeless lessons about faith, obedience, and the dangers of looking back. In Genesis 19, the command was clear: do not look back. Lot and his family were given the opportunity to escape the fiery destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but they were told not to look back at the wicked cities they were leaving behind. For Lot's wife, the temptation to glance back, to hold on to the life she had known, despite its sin and corruption, proved to be fatal. In her hesitation, she was judged. Lot's wife's act of disobedience wasn't just about a momentary glance. It was about a deeper internal struggle. She longed for the comforts of the past, for the life she was leaving behind, even though it was filled with sin. This act of looking back serves as a metaphor for the human tendency to cling to the old, to the things that God calls us to leave behind in order to move forward in faith. Jesus himself used the story of Lot's wife as a powerful warning to his followers. In Luke 17:32, he simply says, "Remember Lot's wife." Why does he urge us to remember her? Because her story is not just ancient history, it is a living lesson. Jesus is reminding us that when God calls us to move forward, we must trust his guidance fully. Looking back, whether it's to our past sins, old comforts, or old ways of thinking, can be a serious hindrance to our spiritual progress. The truth is, in today's world, many of us still struggle with the temptation to look back. We cling to old habits, relationships, or mindsets that keep us from moving forward in God's plan for our lives. The story of Lot's wife challenges us to examine whether we are too attached to our past, whether we are allowing the past to dictate our present and future. God's call is always forward, not backward. When He asks us to let go of the things of this world, it is not because He wants to punish us or make life harder. Rather, He knows that holding on to the past, the sin, the distractions, the comforts, will prevent us from experiencing the fullness of the life He has for us. Just as Lot's wife's hesitation led to her irreversible fate, our hesitation in letting go of the past can stunt our spiritual growth. The salt pillar remains as a living monument to this truth. Looking back can cost us everything. But there is hope. Just as Lot and his daughters were given a chance to escape and start anew, so too can we embrace God's mercy and grace. The story doesn't have to end in tragedy. We can choose to move forward in faith, trusting that God's future is far greater than anything we might leave behind.
As we reflect on the significance of the salt pillar, we are invited to ask ourselves, are we looking back at the past in a way that hinders our walk with God? Are we ready to trust Him fully, leave the past behind, and walk boldly into the future He has prepared for us? The lesson of Lot's wife is not just about history. It is a call to action for us today. The salt pillar at Mount Sodom stands as an eternal reminder of both God's judgment and His mercy. While it is easy to focus solely on the tragic fate of Lot's wife, we must also recognize that her transformation into salt is not just a symbol of disobedience, it is also a stark illustration of God's righteous justice. This pillar of salt is not just a curiosity for archaeologists. It's a living monument to God's holiness and His uncompromising stance against sin. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is one of judgment, yes, but also one of God's mercy. God could have destroyed Lot and his family along with the cities. Instead, He offered them a way out, sending angels to rescue them from the coming destruction. This act of grace and mercy was extended to those who were willing to listen and obey His commands. Yet in the case of Lot's wife, she hesitated. Her act of looking back wasn't just about longing for the city. It symbolized a failure to trust in God's plan and an unwillingness to leave behind the sin that had once held her captive. God's judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't arbitrary. The cities were known for their wickedness and corruption. The people of Sodom and Gomorrah had turned away from God, living in sinful defiance of His commands. The fire and brimstone that fell upon the cities was a direct consequence of their actions. Yet, in the midst of judgment, God's mercy was evident. Lot and his family were given the chance to escape, and the destruction that befell Sodom and Gomorrah served as a sobering warning to the rest of the world. The pillar of salt, then, is not merely a relic of the past. It is a spiritual symbol that continues to speak to us today. It speaks of God's justice, but it also speaks of His mercy. While Lot's wife's glance back was a moment of disobedience, it serves as a reminder that God's mercy is still available for those who turn to Him in repentance. It's a call to leave behind the things of the past that may be holding us back, and to embrace the future He has prepared for us, free from the stain of sin. The mercy that God extended to Lot's family offers hope. Even when judgment is deserved, God provides a way out. He offers forgiveness and a chance to start anew. But we must heed His commands. We must not look back. For in looking back, we may risk losing the very thing God wants to give us: freedom, healing, and eternal life. The pillar of salt, standing against the backdrop of Mount Sodom, will continue to serve as both a warning and a message of hope. As long as it stands, it reminds us that God's justice is real, but so is His grace. It calls us to live lives of obedience and trust, moving forward with faith, leaving behind the past, and embracing the new life God offers. The salt pillar stands as a monument, not just to judgment, but to the possibility of redemption for all who choose to follow God's way. As we consider the legacy of Lot's wife and the salt pillar, we are left with a powerful question. Are we ready to leave behind the sin and distractions of our past and step boldly into the future God has prepared for us? The pillar stands as a reminder. The choice is ours. As we near the conclusion of our exploration into the story of Lot's wife, we must reflect on the profound spiritual implications this story holds for us today. While the pillar of salt remains a tangible reminder of the consequences of disobedience, its deeper significance lies in the spiritual lessons it conveys. The Bible doesn't just record events for historical purposes. It offers us living, breathing lessons for our own lives. In Luke 17:32, Jesus gives a clear command: remember Lot's wife. These three simple words carry a weight that is often overlooked. Why does Jesus urge us to remember this tragic moment? What does it mean for us, here and now, in a world so full of distractions, temptations, and struggles? Remember Lot's wife is a call to vigilance. It is a warning against the dangers of looking back, not just physically, but spiritually. In the context of our daily lives, it speaks to the temptation to cling to old habits, to hold on to relationships or comforts that God has called us to move beyond. Just as Lot's wife looked back and became paralyzed by her attachment to the world she was leaving, we too can become stuck when we refuse to fully embrace the future God has for us. The story also reminds us of the danger of hesitation. Lot's wife hesitated for just a moment, and that moment of disobedience had eternal consequences. In our own lives, hesitation in responding to God's call can lead us into spiritual stagnation. When God calls us to move forward, whether in our faith, relationships, or life choices, we cannot afford to hesitate. There is no middle ground in the journey of faith. We either move forward in obedience or risk being left behind, spiritually speaking. But the story also contains a message of hope. Even as Lot's wife became a pillar of salt, the story does not end with condemnation. Lot and his daughters were spared because they listened and obeyed. God is always ready to extend His mercy to those who choose to follow Him, even if we stumble or hesitate along the way. The pillar of salt stands as a symbol of both judgment and mercy, reminding us that God's grace is sufficient for those who turn to Him with a willing heart. The act of remembering Lot's wife is not just a call to avoid her mistake. It's a call to actively move forward in our faith, trusting that God has a better future in store for us. The past, with all its comforts and sins, cannot hold us back. We are called to look ahead, fix our eyes on the promises of God, and step forward in obedience, leaving behind the old ways and trusting Him completely.
As we stand before the pillar of salt, both literal and symbolic, we are asked, will we move forward or will we look back? The choice remains ours. The story of Lot's wife continues to speak to us today, urging us to trust God's plan, embrace His grace, and follow His direction without hesitation. The pillar of salt is not just a relic of ancient history. It is a living lesson that calls us to examine our hearts and our faith. In a world that often pulls us back to old ways, we are reminded to keep our eyes fixed on the future, a future filled with God's promises, mercy, and hope. Remember Lot's wife and choose to walk forward in faith. As we conclude our exploration of the story of Lot's wife, the lasting impact of this biblical event continues to reverberate not just through the pages of Scripture, but through the very land where it unfolded. The pillar of salt at Mount Sodom stands as a powerful testament to the consequences of disobedience, but it also serves as a beacon of the spiritual lessons that we must carry forward. For centuries, people have looked to the region around the Dead Sea, where Sodom and Gomorrah once stood, and have seen the salt formations as reminders of the biblical narrative. Whether the specific pillar of salt still stands today or whether it has eroded over time, its significance endures. The story of Lot's wife has become more than just a tale of judgment. It is a symbol of the decision we all face when God calls us to leave behind what is comfortable, what is known, and step into His promises. The story of Lot's wife is not just a historical account. It is a living metaphor for our daily spiritual walk. Every time we choose to look back at the things God has asked us to leave behind, we risk turning into something stagnant and lifeless. But when we choose to move forward, trusting God with all that lies ahead, we embrace a future filled with His grace, mercy, and guidance. As we consider the scientific and archaeological evidence that supports the biblical narrative, we are reminded that God's Word stands as both spiritual truth and historical fact. The land of the Dead Sea, with its salt pillars and destroyed cities, confirms that what was written in Genesis is not merely a story for the ages, but a real event with real consequences. The Bible speaks to us in ways that resonate beyond history, reminding us that the choices we make today have eternal ramifications. In a world that is often distracted by the temptations of the past, the story of Lot's wife calls us to focus on the future, to look ahead with faith and obedience. The salt pillar stands as a silent testimony to the dangers of hesitation and disobedience, but it also challenges us to reflect on our own spiritual journey. Are we looking back with longing, or are we moving forward, trusting God for what He has in store? As you reflect on the story of Lot's wife, remember this: God's call is always forward. His promises are ahead of us, not behind. And while the story of Lot's wife serves as a warning, it also offers hope. Even in the face of judgment, God extended mercy. Even in the midst of destruction, He provided a way out for those who were willing to obey. The question remains: will you look back, or will you move forward? The pillar of salt stands not as a monument to the past, but as a call to the future. A future that promises life, grace, and fulfillment for those who trust in God and follow His leading. The story of Lot's wife is not just history. It's a spiritual invitation to step into a new chapter, one that leaves the past behind and embraces the abundant life God has promised. The question is yours to answer. Will you remember Lot's wife, or will you remember God's call to move forward in faith?